Hi there. Today we're going to talk about the good news that we received about our RV, but then the bad news of how to figure out how to get back there.
And I'm going to introduce you to some of our route planning with RV Trip Wizard. And there's been previous videos out there on RV Trip Wizard, but there's new features that you're not going to want to miss in this video. Hey everyone, I'm Jim.
I'm Corinne.
And we are RVIntoRetirement. And if you've been following our journey, you'll know that we've been out of our RV for the last 6 weeks. And if you want to see what happened that got us here, you can look at the video that I'll post up here. But we got good news. We're still in Colorado, but we're headed back to Texas to pick up the coach.
Yay!
So that's presented some challenges because we had reservations for the month of June. In fact, we're full-time RVers, so we pretty much plan out almost a year in advance, but we had to cancel all of May and all of June. But here we are. It's now the first week of June, and we need to fill up the rest of the month.
It is a challenge because, as we know, a lot of people have already reserved. There's spotty opportunities to get reservations, and we also want to make sure we're keeping sort of to our route. We don't want to veer off too much, so that's presenting quite a few challenges for us.
Yeah, in a few minutes, what I'll do is I'll take you through our route trip planner and show you some of the things that we use RV Trip Wizard for and how it gets us to our destination. We're also looking at a couple of other things to fill in the blank spots. One of them is Harvest Host. And if you're not a member of Harvest Host, we'll put a link down below. But what it is essentially wineries, boutique places, distilleries, craft beer places that you can call ahead and stay overnight.
Some other things that we're looking at some little unknown spots that might be at some small town campgrounds. A lot of the towns have little campgrounds that you might be able to get in. A lot of times they don't have reservations and you can just kind of get in. Sometimes they have hookups, sometimes they don't, but we're taking that into account. The other thing that we're looking at is Boondockers Welcome to see if there's anything there that we can do, and you know, even for a night or 2 nights or whatever it is. Again, we're kind of just trying to craft a little plan together so we can get to our summer destination.
Yeah, right now it's June 2nd, and our next firm reservation is July 1st in Idaho. And so we have quite a big gap to fill. We're going to leave here this weekend, and hopefully we'll be back in Nacogdoches, Texas around June 9th. And back in the RV and on the road around the 14th, I'm suspecting. So we need to fill in the gap around between the 14th and July 1st. And we hope you join us on this journey. We'll be posting videos on exactly how our planning is working, what worked, what didn't work. And it's all part of the full-time RV life. You need to be adaptable. You need to have to be able to adapt quickly to plan changes. This threw us for a big curve, and you know, now we're scrambling. And as you know, so many people bought RVs last year that it's really difficult to get spots along the way.
So the thing is also that we knew that we were going to have this gap. We just didn't know when we were going to get back in our RV. That's what's caused the issue for us. We couldn't really do anything until we had, and we still don't even have a specific date. We have probably a specific week. So we know that we'll just have to wing it and do the best we can to cover the gaps.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to jump into the computer and start the trip planning and stick through it. Like I said, if you've seen RV Trip Wizard before, these are all new items that they've added and features that really make the planning a lot easier in so many ways.
Yeah, I was very surprised when I started looking last night, and I saw tools that had not been there the last time I had looked. So it is really becoming more and more useful, especially in the situation we're in.
Probably one of the biggest ones that I like personally is they've added weather and winds to the planner. And so if you follow some of the Facebook groups, there's always a lot of questions on what's the maximum wind that my RV can sustain. It'll show you whether there's a crosswind, a headwind, a tailwind, and also any storms along your route so that you can make adjustments on the fly. So let's go in and take a look at those right now. Okay, everybody, so here we are at RVTripWizard.com, and if you're not already a subscriber, they do have a 7-day trial that you can sign up for and do some test routes for yourself. But what we're going to do is we're going to go in to the planner. I'm already logged in. And usually what it does is it opens to the last trip that you have. But what we're going to do is a new trip, and we're going to call it Demo. And we're going to say that we're leaving on June 14th. And the date can become important for a couple of reasons, because if you have hard, fast reservations at certain places, keeping track of the days will help you in your planning. And I'll show you a little bit of that as we go along. So I'm going to hit create. I'm going to use my current location. So our coach is in Nacogdoches, Texas. So I'm going to enter that as a starting point. And then that gives us some settings that you can set up. So you can add any trip notes over here, whether the trip is active, a tentative trip, or an archive trip. I'll say, so this is a tentative trip, so it won't send me a pre-departure email. I have my units set for the United States. Now this is important part here for your RV to you can either look up your RV or manually input some of the figures. If you look up your RV, it has fifth wheel motorhome, tent trailer, has most of the popular brands. I went in and already did mine, and actually I'm at 42 feet. I put 13 feet as my height, although my actual coach feet is about 12 and a half feet. I like to give a little buffer, and what this will do is make sure that you don't route yourself into low bridges or anything like that. My weight is actually 43,000 pounds, so some of these things have been saved since my previous coach that we had. We're not carrying any propane. We do use diesel. I'm going to update this also. So I have 150 gallons of fuel, and I want a fuel reserve of 15 gallons so that it'll give me warnings on the route as I'm planning it. And I'm going to guess that we average 7 miles to the gallon. I'm going to save those trip settings in a minute. I'm going to go over here. I have a few things that I could do as far as my routing. So make sure that you're not on standard routing and that you're on RV routing. You can put if you want to avoid tolls or avoid highways. I do want to avoid ferries. I do want to avoid unpaved roads. And I'm going to use the search engine's routing time. And expenses you can fill in on what you think your average expenses are per day. Typically, I actually don't like this feature unless you're very budget conscious on this. We're full-time, so we have it pretty much down what our expenses are. And so now I can save all these trip settings, and what it's going to give us is a generic map, and it shows our starting point over here, and it would show you your nights and your cost, and you can go in and fill that in later. So I'm going to hide that for a second. And the next thing I do is I'm going to put in my destination. So I'm going to put in Mountain Home, Idaho. Let's put Mountain Home RV Resort in Idaho. Some of the nice features it gives you here is that it gives you the rating. There's reviews that you can read on it. It lets you know they have plugins, water, sewer, big coaches, or Wi-Fi, pets allowed, and there's restrooms. And you can go further and look at the park details. And you can look at it on a satellite map, which is nice if you're worried about the length of your RV. Any reviews that are on here? So this person stayed just a couple of weeks ago, and it was they rated it at 5 stars. Any tips? There is a Walmart nearby, and then the weather, what the expected weather is for the next few days. So I'm going to add this to my trip, and then you get a few choices here. So we're on our way. We're going to be staying there 12 days, and you can lock in the stay. So I know my reservation is for June 18th, for example, and I'm leaving there the 30th. And so what that does is that locks in those days on your trip, and I could just hit it, add to my trip. And so since there was no other stops except for my original one, what we can do is show the entire route. And I'm going to go here to map settings real quick and turn off some of these things so that it's clear to you. And it automatically takes me on the best route along the way. You'll see this little fuel thing right here, and that's telling me, hey, if I leave Nacogdoches, Texas, I'm going to need to fuel up by Albuquerque. And that'll be based on what I entered for my coach, the number of gallons and the fuel mileage, and the estimates on what the computer program says that we're going to burn. Okay, so now I obviously can't do this in a day. So over here, if I look, it says, okay, from Nacogdoches, Texas to Mountain Home on the 18th, I have 4 nights of driving to get me there if I left on the 14th. And so that's when we can start planning where we want to stay, how far we want to drive in a particular day. And they have a few features that you can use, and some of them are on the map settings. And so let's take a look at a couple of those. So we want to make sure that we see the low clearances on, and we want to enable filters. And so what the filters does is lets you see different types of things. So we want to see commercial and private parks, any Corps of Engineer, pull-through sites, pets allowed. I don't need tent camping because I'm not going to be big rig access. That's really good. And electric. And I could, we have solar power, and so we can use any type of electric or even no electric at all. But those are the filters that we have. Then you can add points of interest. You can add fuel stops if you wanted. We use a different app for that because we use diesel fuel and use the TSD program. My favorites are Cabela's, Bass Pro Shops, and casinos. But you can see here, if you wanted to stay at a Cracker Barrel, it will. You can add Cracker Barrels to your list of things here. And here's the driving radius that I was telling you about. So you can either choose to show the driving radius. They have 2 types, and it calculates based on the roads or speed limits or just straight line. It's kind of funky when you do this other one, so I just have the straight line circles. and for hazards, we want to see low clearances. Okay, so those are our filters. And I want to turn on to show me the parks. So go to the map settings, and I'm going to show campgrounds. And so this brings up an awful lot of campgrounds here, but if you scroll in a little closer and figure out exactly where you want to travel to, and let's say our route is going to take us, I just want to go through Dallas on our first day and get somewhere just on the other side. And so I can scroll in a little further on these, and here's a KOA. Again, I can look at the park details and see if I like it, if everything looks good. I can add this to the trip. And now I'm going to stay there one night. This is where it gets interesting, and you want to add this after, not the last stop, but after our first stop, which was Nacogdoches, Texas. So I added that. And you can keep on doing this. You can go back to your trip and see that you still have 3 nights. You can show the entire trip. And I won't go through all of those, but you can see there's plenty of campgrounds here, and that I'm going to turn them off so it cleans up the map a little bit. But if you don't want to camp out every night, you just need to zoom in near a city. Let's look at Amarillo, which would probably be our second night stop. And I could search for local POIs, points of interest. And so it shows me there's a Petro here and a TA if I wanted to sleep at one of those places or get fuel there. Now, one of the more important features that they've come up with lately, let me show the entire trip. And so here's our whole route. If I go into the map settings, what they added was weather layers. And you can only turn one of these on at a time. So they have radar, wind speed, and wildfire. So let's turn on radar first. And so this is going to give you the an overlay of the radar throughout the country. And so I could see that if we were leaving today, I have clear weather up to about Albuquerque. There's some storms going on over there, but otherwise it looks pretty good. Now, suppose you were traveling in the Northeast up in the Chicago area. There's a lot more weather going on over there, and it shows you the severity by the colors over here. The other important piece with this is, let me get back to weather layers, is, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, is people were interested in wind speeds and how fast can I drive in, and we're going through sections over here where it can get a little dicey if we were going up through Wyoming, but right now the winds look pretty good. So anything in the blue, even the yellow, is approaching 20-30 miles an hour. Now, if you start seeing the red which begins around 40-45 miles an hour, depending on your driving ability and your rig, you might want to either hold up a night or plan around this. And you can zoom in on certain segments of your leg and see which way is the wind blowing. So I have a down arrow here. So as I go through this section, I'm going to be running into a headwind, which for fuel purposes, it's a concern. But what's more of a concern is when we see winds coming across our route and heavy side winds, and that's or crosswinds. Right over here, you can see in Price, the winds are coming almost directly across the freeway over there. Same thing again in Provo, Utah. So had this been higher wind speeds, it might be a concern. It makes for a lot of white knuckle driving. Let me see. And the other thing on the weather was for smoke and wildfires. So right now I don't think there is a lot, although I just saw one pop up over here. Oh, there's a lot more than I thought there would be. But you would worry about smoky conditions along your route, and you can look at that. And it always pays to hold up a night or two if you're going through bad weather situations. Now you can add, in addition to these campgrounds that are already programmed in here, you could go up in here and add any address that you want, and it will find the location and add it to your map. And so a lot of times what we use is Harvest Host. And if I log into Harvest Host, and you can do a search by state or route or whatever you want. I'm going to search by route. And we were starting in Nacogdoches, Texas, and we're going to Mountain Home. And this brings up all of the Harvest Host locations that are along our route. And you can choose how many miles to the side of your journey that you want to go to stop at one of these. And so let's say we're going and I wanted to stop at Wichita Falls, and I see that there's the Horsebend winery here. I can just grab all of this address right here, copy it, bring it over to RV Trip Wizard, put it in there. It shows it, it's right here, and there's my route right up there. And so all I need to do is go more details, and I'm going to stay there a night, save custom stop, and it just showed me the route to take to this winery. And essentially it's a free overnight. They do recommend that you buy something from the winery, but to be a gracious guest, we usually do. And I'll put a link to Harvest Host in the description below if you don't have that. It's something to check out. It can save you a lot of money while you're traveling, so that you don't have to go to RV parks all of the time. We love this tool, and we do it primarily. It's computer based, so it doesn't go on your phone. But RV Trip Wizard is part of RV Life, and so if you do buy a subscription to RV Trip Wizard, you get the RV Life app on your smartphone. And what you can do is you can pull up this exact trip and get turn-by-turn directions on your phone. We usually do it two ways. One, we do the RV Life, but also what I will do is plug some of these destinations in our Garmin RV 770 GPS that sits right in front of me, and my wife will use the other one on her phone, and we can coordinate. I think some of the new features, to recap, that RV Trip Wizard added was the ability to do the weather, the ability to do the wind. The other one was the campgrounds and the filtering of the campgrounds, so that you can just not have a gazillion of these show up. You can narrow it down to just what you want. So if it doesn't have 50 amp, you can take that off, and you want full hookups, any of these that you want. And they have all of the features are right here where you can drop down and choose your amenities and anything like that.
Well, I hope you found that helpful, all the tips, and how we're going through this. Again, we're gonna keep you in the loop on what we're doing, what works, what doesn't work, as we try to plan our trip to our summer location.
And as always, if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. We'd love to answer them for you and tell us about your journey and your adventure. Until then, we hope you have a great week, and next time you see us, we should be in our RV.
Yay! Bye.
Bye.
Have a great one.
Yes.